the working capital management is the biggest challenge that any MSME in our country really faces.
Sometimes a public sector bank has a certain product that maybe a private bank doesn't have. An NBFC has a product that the bankers in general don't offer. So my advice would always be that talk to a lot of people.
Many MSMEs actually fail because while they have a great product and they have a great market and so on and so forth, they really don't know how to manage their finances. And many times they don't get the right kind of financial support. Now, let me ask Aditya that in the course of your 50-year journey, I am sure cycles would have come and gone, and out of these 50 years, 40 years you have been a listed company, right? For, like, if I remember what you said. How did the company actually manage some of these ups and downs from a financial perspective? Did you get the right kind of support from the ecosystem? Did all of this actually help you out? Who were the people who stood by you?
Yeah, so obviously, as you said, we've been through some ups and downs. Most recently, after we started the 2 subsidiaries, and then COVID came and hit. So yeah, I would say that it's very important to communicate very clearly with the financial community. It could be banks, NBFCs, whoever you're working with. I think it's very important to communicate and explain to them really what is your business model, what is the payback period on the investment that you're making. I think it's about setting the expectations right. And I think very often when you're looking for money, for example, I'm, let's say, filing a project report with a bank, I will be tempted to say that, hey, I'll turn this around in like 2 years, 3 years, right? Because you think that if I say 5 or 7 years, maybe you will not get the funding, right? So I think those are the kinds of temptations that one has to resist sometimes, and tell people, look, this is going to take a little bit of time. You have to be patient, and you need to work out a product for me that works, right? It could be anything from getting a moratorium on your repayment in the initial phase, maybe a 1 year, 2 year moratorium. These are things that we have negotiated with banks, and we have kind of interacted with them very closely, and tried to understand who can offer the right product that meets your requirement in terms of your funding needs, whether it is capex funding or it's working capital funding, right? So my advice would always be that talk to a lot of people. Sometimes a public sector bank has a certain product that maybe a private bank doesn't have. An NBFC has a product that the bankers in general don't offer. So you have to be, I think, very conversant with what are the products available, how they work. My mother and I have a simple philosophy: we don't buy anything that we don't understand. People have tried to sell us hedging products, people have tried to sell us all kinds of stuff, right? So sometimes I tell them in a funny way that, look, I know how to machine brass, I know how to mold rubber, but I don't understand what you're saying, and if I don't understand it, I'm not buying it, right? So maybe these are the small little things that perhaps MSMEs need to be aware of when they go into the market to raise money.
Obviously, whether it is a bank or an NBFC or whatever, as I mentioned a while ago, you can have a great product, but if you don't have proper finances, it's a problem, right? Do you see some companies actually struggling across? Do they really know what to do?
Yeah, great. I think most of the company who used to touch base with us, they generally come up when they are having certain issues. Many times the issues are related to, say, cash flow, because they are not able to deliver in time, or maybe they have already delivered, the payment hasn't come to them. It's almost 70% company faces this kind of issues more often. So as I've told you, most of the company are having their own share of financial issues more often. Being an expert, you as an BSc Finance and specifically focusing for MSME, what would you suggest that how this MSME company should focus or take care of the challenges they are not sure when they are going to face, what kind of challenges, specifically related to working capital management, cash flows and all these things?
I think you said the right thing, because I think the working capital management is the biggest challenge that any MSME in our country really faces, because usually the cash flow cycles are very long, right? people don't necessarily pay you on time, or you don't get the right kind of supplier credit. So therefore, you are always going to be very high as far as your working capital gap is concerned. While there are rules like that 45-day rule where an MSME has to be paid and so on, many times there is a default in happening in doing that, and therefore it becomes a bit of a problem for an MSME to manage its working capital cycle. So typically what people end up doing is that they borrow at a very high cost to bridge this gap, and therefore end up becoming unprofitable at some stage, right? This is number one. The second thing is that when it comes to expanding, and this is a very fatal error a lot of these people do, that I want to add on, let's say modernize a new machine, right, or buy up a new machine to increase my capacity, or to retire an old machine and replace it with a new technology one. I end up diverting working capital towards purchasing of the machinery, right. So what happens, as it is I am stretched as far as working capital is concerned, further I dig a hole for myself by diverting the working capital into purchase of a machinery, and the problem becomes really acute, and therefore I am not able to pay up my loan EMIs on time and so on and so forth. So these are some of the things that people make a mistake. So when we talk about working capital management or cash management, it is a very important skill that MSMEs need to focus upon. Principle number one, make sure that you collect your sales on time as far as practicable. So selling doesn't mean that your journey is ended. Only when the money comes into your coffers is the sale process over. So you have to be very sharp on your collections. You have to stretch as far as practicable your creditors are concerned, so you bring down the working capital. Take as many cash discounts as you can. If you are able to let go of a little bit of profit, but you get the money upfront, it makes a lot more sense. Never borrow for a purpose which is not clear, right. People tend to borrow and put money into share market, and that is a strict no-no, right. So because you are diverting money out of a productive use into something which is unproductive. The other thing people do is when they start to make some profits, first thing the tendency is that let me buy some land, which is a completely illiquid asset. So don't divert your cash flows into buying a piece of land unless you are trying to set up a factory on itself. That's a different issue. Unproductive land usage is something that you should avoid. Never ever divert your working capital to buying long-term assets like a machinery or a factory or anything like that. So some of these basic principles, if an MSME takes care of, they will never be short of working capital or cash. This is a very important thing that people have to focus upon, because once times you default on your loan, your entire career, your entire future as far as the entity is concerned is finished. There are practical difficulties that people have to manage, but then some of the basic principles one should never let go of.